hello. I'm happy to be with Ewing. So, what can you tell about you? How did you start comics? And
Okay, well, I started with 2000 AD, which is the British science fiction anthology comic. And one thing that they do, which the big American comic companies don't do, and not many places do anymore, is they do unsolicited submissions. So you can send in, anybody can send in it's got to be a 5-page twist ending story done in one. You can't send them in, your Judge Dredd epic or your big Strontium Dog epic. They won't take that. But you can, I think it's 4 pages these days. If you do them a 4-page twist ending science fiction story, it'll go in a pile and they'll look at it and get back to you. And that is, so it's a way for people to kind of break in from nothing.
Okay. Did you start with the stories that was already drawn, or was it only written stuff?
No, it's the way it works is I kind of wrote a 5-page twist ending horror story and kind of sent it in, and then they found somebody to draw it. It's 2000 AD is sort of full script. You do all of the plot and the dialogue and together, and then it goes to the artist. Whereas Marvel, you have the option of doing just the plot. That goes to the artist. The art comes back, and then you kind of fill in the dialogue there. So you can work that way. And I found that's very good. That's very organic. That's a very good way of working. But for 2000 AD, it's always full script.
Okay.
So.
And about 2000 AD, what were your major works? I know you work on Judge Dredd. What other series did you work on?
Well, with Henry Flint, I co-created Zombo, which is it's a very anarchic comedy horror kind of thing, about a sort of tame zombie working for a kind of a universal government against other zombies. It's probably the short way of putting it, but it's much more of a kind of ongoing sitcom than an actual adventure story. It's more just an excuse to cram in as many jokes and I don't know, probably the closest thing. It's a sort of Monty Python style take on the kind of zombie genre, but so that's something that I'm fairly proud of. And then I think more recently there's a more kind of serious space war type epic thing called Damnation Station, which I think is being collected soonish. So maybe, I don't know if it is or not, but there's enough for a collection. So we'll see whether it is or not. I think it might be.
Okay. So,
have you seen the 2 Dredd movies adaptations?
Yes, I have. I saw the first one when I was a lot younger. I was in my teens. I was probably roughly the right age for it. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I think it's aged fairly well as a kind of piece of camp.
Yeah.
It's not a great Dredd film, but it's an okay film, and you can sort of tell why it's been so popular. I think the newer one is, I mean, in its own way, it's also quite camp. It's but it's much truer to the Dredd character, and it's more truer to when he first arrived in the 70s. That kind of gritty, very 70s. It feels like all the technology in there feels like. It doesn't feel like an extrapolation from today. It feels like an extrapolation from the 1970s. If there'd been some of what today might look like, if there'd been some terrible catastrophe in the recent past. So it feels, the second Dredd film feels more like an alternate present than a look at the future. And I think a lot of people were kind of missing the glitz and the glamour and the hugeness of the first Dredd film. But I think the tone is much better in the second one. It's much more, I think, what the fans were wanting to see. So,
So right now, IDW is also printing some new Judge Dredd stories for the US market. You were able to work with them for with a crossover with Mars Attacks.
Yes.
Was it different to work on the US Judge Dredd than in the UK Judge Dredd?
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of fun because the thing with the UK Judge Dredd is that there's a lot of history there, and because there's a lot of history and a lot has happened, you can kind of you're always sort of looking forward. You can't really go back into the past and sort of pick stuff out of the past, because usually if there's been a bad guy in Judge Dredd, Judge Dredd's probably shot him or incarcerated him for a lot of years, so and they're probably not going to come back. So with 2008, you've always got to make up new stuff for Dredd to do. Whereas with the IDW, I kind of felt like it was an excuse to kind of indulge my nostalgia a little bit, because it's sort of alternate Dredd, almost like with Marvel, you have Spider-Man and you have Ultimate Spider-Man, which is kind of like a new rebooted version. And this was a sort of new rebooted version of Judge Dredd, so I could go back into the past and pick out some of my favourite bits, both from my old stories and from Judge Dredd stories in general. So I had things like the Ape Gang, Don Uggy, the Ape Gangster, and I had the Pit, which was, I brought that in, and I brought in a couple of... I got to use Anderson a lot. I got to... and it was a nice sort of... It was a nice excuse to kind of go into the sort of past of Dredd and
And were you a big fan of Mars Attack? You were a fan of Top Scars, or...
No, I liked the film, but unfortunately IDW I don't think have the rights to the film, so it was like I was specifically told I couldn't have the Martians say akak, or I couldn't have anything from the film in the thing, so it was all based on the cards. So I kind of had a look at the cards, and I tried to get some elements in of that. I tried to have bubblegum cards kept popping up in the narrative, but mostly, I mean, the thing about Judge Dredd and Mars Attacks is that usually with Dredd, how to put this, they're both sort of the bad guy.
Yeah.
Judge Dredd and the Martians, they're both kind of there to oppress the ordinary citizens. So having them kind of fight each other is sort of a lot of fun, in that it's an excuse for Dredd to actually be fairly heroic, without mitigating the fact that he's a complete bastard. So
You're currently working on Loki for Marvel. What do you think of the Loki from the movies?
Well, without the Loki from the films, there probably wouldn't be a Loki comic. So I'm quite glad of him, and it's because he's Tom Hiddleston does a very good performance in that. It's very subtle. He's bringing a lot in. He's not just playing the sort of mustache twirling villain. He's kind of really, he kind of puts a sympathetic side in, which is I think that's very important, and that's probably the reason why the character's taken off so much and why he's got so many fans now, is because of Tom Hiddleston's performance in those films. I think in the hands of a lesser actor, the same lines could have come across as very one-dimensional and very sort of quite uninteresting, but and I think really that's informed a lot of certainly it's informed my take on Loki, trying to find that sort of sympathetic side, while at the same time not making him completely, a sort of goody two-shoes. But without making him this sort of goody-goody, utterly heroic character, it's kind of trying to find that middle ground, that subtlety.
It's funny because he's getting the sexy vibe, because he's very popular now. There are a lot of women reading Loki. Yeah. It's one of the best comics, so it seems to be cool for that.
Yeah. I mean, just to have I think the most important thing American comics certainly can be doing now, because over here comics are sort of very much respected, very very much kind of read by large vast numbers of people. I think in America and in Britain they're not really. They're much more of a niche item, a kind of luxury thing for a very small audience. And I think growing that audience is the best thing that comics can do. And one of the ways of doing that is maybe because comics haven't been that female friendly. They've not been very female friendly in America in the past. There's been a sort of sense of them, and I think this is a wrong idea and has always been wrong, but there's been the idea that they're traditionally for boys, for like adolescent men. And it's I think that's a wrong idea. Women have always read comics. Women have always been into comics. It's past time to kind of and we're getting a lot of great female creators in the medium now. And it's really past time to start reaching out to that audience and maybe kind of saying to the adolescent audience, the adolescent male audience, you know, we can't cater to you. We'd rather cater to like the 99% of other people out there who aren't picking up our books because they're for like, you know, zitty teenage boys. So it's very harsh on, you know, regular readers.
So you're also working on, first you are working on Mighty Avengers.
Yes.
And now you're working with a new version, with the all-new Captain America.
Well,
were you part of the choice of making Falcon Captain America, or was it only Remender's?
No, that was all Rick Remender's idea. How it happened with me was that what was going to be Mighty Avengers 15, that was always going to be a kind of Falcon solo issue. I really wanted to focus on the Falcon because I hadn't really got into his head much. Apart from issue 6, which I think has just been reprinted quite recently. And then I kind of got word that they were making him the new Captain America. And I thought, great, good, excellent. That makes a solo issue even more of a thing. And then I heard that he was going to be, like, around that time he was going to turn evil because of the Axis thing. And again, great, this makes my issue more interesting. This is all good news. And I heard it was going to be a new number 1. And that's like, okay, well, now we're starting to get into a very interesting place where, like, people are going to pick the book up and it's going to be this weird reverse of everything. Yeah, this weird reverse of everything they're expecting. And it's sort of, on the one hand, I don't know, some people have been freaked out by that a little, but on the other hand, it's sort of almost informed what this new, because it's like a season 1 and season 2 of a TV show in my mind, in that people are kind of picking it up with season 2 because they've heard season 1 so go, and we're sort of wrong-footing them a little bit. We're wrong-footing the expectations, and I think the second season is going to be much darker. It's going to be more, because the first season was sort of starting from quite a hopeful place and carrying on this very optimistic trajectory, whereas I think the second series is going to be starting in a very dark place and then having the optimism kind of, and over the course of the thing it'll be rising up from that, but it's starting in a much darker, much kind of grimmer place, and hopefully, you know, knock on wood, people will be along for the ride on that.
And you're working also with Luke Cage. You know there will be a new series from Netflix.
Looking forward to it.
You think maybe we'll have his own books sometimes?
I imagine so. I'm not fully in the loop on what the future plans are, but I'd be very surprised if these new Netflix series is for him and for Jessica Jones, his wife. I'd be very surprised if that doesn't lead to, if not a solo book, then a book that's related to that. But I'm, you know, don't quote me on anything because I'm not in the loop right now. For all I know, it could be they're completely different plans.
Okay. And right now, you're living in the UK or you're living in the US?
Yes, I'm living in the UK.
And how does it work with the Marvel scenarist team? You know, because sometimes they meet to have big plans about what they're gonna do.
Well, I've not got to one I've not gone to one of those yet. I've been told they'd like to have me in the room in the future, but we'll see what happens there. It could be, you know, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm I'm sort of all right with not going to those because I'm okay just being told what they come up with, and and working out what I do with that.
And you for original scene, you had you work with Kieran Gillen on the no, it was with Jason Aaron on how does it work to do a duo book with two writers?
Well, with that one, I mean, with something like Doctor Who, which I'm writing with Rob Williams, it's a much more even-handed collaboration. For that one, Jason Aaron was really, really busy with Original Sin. So what he basically did was give me some plot beats and sort of give me Thor's half of the plot and what he wanted Thor to like go through, and kind of, for instance, things like Odin coming back, the whole thing of Angela's origin. That was, I was given a little sort of Bible of Angela's origin and sort of how the 10th realm operated, and I sort of embellished a little on that, and kind of, but I was given a lot of material to work with, and then I came up with all of the Loki stuff. Loki's half of the plot, and then I kind of did a plot which I ran past Jason for approval, and then I did the script. So Jason was heavily involved, but at the same time he kind of let me have my head to he let me sort of run ahead with it. He wasn't micromanaging, so that was good.
And so you were talking that you work also on Doctor Who. Do you have other projects with Marvel or with other editors?
I've got some other projects at Marvel that I can't talk about yet. One thing that has just been announced is something I'm working with Alan Davis, which is the Ultron Forever, which is, it's gonna tie in with the. It won't tie in with the movie, but it's coming out at the same time as the movie, and I think the idea is that people can come out of the film, and if they want a sort of Avengers comic with Ultron, this will be one that they can pick up without getting too heavily invested in the general continuity. And then if it's almost like an entry level thing. It's kind of a gateway. But yeah, it was Tom Brevoort, my main editor, kind of came to me with the idea of Avengers kind of taken from different time periods. So again, you don't have to like be deep into the continuity of where everybody is at the moment. You can sort of, because hopefully if I do my job right, I can just say, oh, here's Thor from the past, and then here's what was going on at that time, and it's sort of, so it's kind of, both for new readers, it's like they don't have to worry about previous continuity, and then for the older readers, they've got that little nostalgia hit to kind of. So hopefully it'll be all around a good thing for everybody, for all the readers.
Will it be about the fact that in a previous issue it was said that Ultron became the old father of?
Yes. This was in Jonathan Hickman's Original Sin Avengers tie-in. I don't know if has that been reprinted?
Not in French, but in.
Okay, but that's come out in English. Yeah, we're going back to that. We figured that was some sort of low-hanging fruit to do an Ultron story about, and yeah, I'm getting back into that and getting very heavily into the sort of Ultron being the All-Father, explaining that and explaining kind of what that entails, and having the various, we've got two Thors, because we've got Thor from the past and Thor from the new one from the very near future. So it's like, I'm hoping to get some. I've sort of asked Tom whether he can give me some details about what's going to happen in the near future in Avengers, so I can drop some little ominous lines. But
so who is the female Thor?
Oh, I know a lot more about the. Oh, I know the secret identity. Yeah. I've been informed, and I know roughly. I've got a rough idea of some of what Jason's planning, but no, I can't.
I guess.
Wild horses can drag it out of me, etc.
And you will be writing the vision, which will be important in the movie. So, in fact, it will be a good bridge with.
It will be.
Okay.
I read something about DJ Christ. What the hell?
Yeah, this was when I was a lot younger. I did a lot of DJing, and at the time I had hair much longer than it is now. This is about as long as it gets. I'm probably going to get a haircut as soon as I get home. But it was much longer. It was sort of down to, below my shoulders, and I had the big beard. And at the time, I was part of a number of DJs, all of whom kind of had DJ names beginning with a C. So I kind of picked DJ. And I only did it a couple of times, but somehow it's found its way into the Wikipedia, and there we go. And, I suppose it's horrifically blasphemous, but at the same time, I'm a pretty good DJ, so
it could be a good character. In
it fits. Yeah, maybe Judge Dredd will end up dealing with that. Anyway,
thank you.
Judge Dredd versus DJ Christ sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.